Are we ready to begin? I'm not totally sure if we have all the judges, but
I'm here. We need a total of 3 judges, I guess. Another judge should be Laura.
Yep, I'm here as well.
Yeah, so we're all here, yes. How about the other players?
I think for now we can just get started because it looks like we have a couple double entries. So why don't we just go down the list for now and see who's here and who's not. So do we have Luna?
I'm here.
Clarity?
I'm also here.
Cool. Abby?
I'm here.
Anjani?
Here.
Mira?
Here.
And Anna?
Here.
Okay, looks like we have everybody. So why don't we get started? Is anybody double entered that needs to go first in order to go to their next event? No? Alrighty, so our first speaker will be Luna. Luna, whenever you're ready.
Just making sure you can see and hear me properly.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Perfect. Then I'll begin on my first word. I have a confession to make. It's been under wraps for quite some time now, but it's ready to face the public. I, Luna Bahari, am a sweet tooth. Okay, I know, it's not that big of a confession, but you gotta admit, it is kinda ironic coming from me, a daughter of a dentist. But hey, my dad won't stop me from being with the love of my life. And that's not even an exaggeration. Literally, I love looking at sweets. I love eating them even more. If I could marry sweets, I totally would. But the way that some of us deal with sugar leaves a sour taste in my mouth. For instance, Dunkin' Donuts employee Brian Johnston uses TikTok to showcase the day in a life as a Dunkin' Donuts employee. Pretty standard content to how he makes the donuts towards selling them, but one of his most viral videos involves him throwing away more than 300 donuts before closing. And after doing more research, I realized that was a common occurrence. Dunkin' Donuts, as well as multiple other donut factories, dispose of all their baked goods and items that weren't sold at the end of each day that totally could have been mine. Though I'm not only here to dunk on Dunkin'. In our world where witnessing wastefulness like this is now the norm, that we can see 300 donuts just get thrown away without any concern, my issue is that we've been wasting our good resources. And this isn't just donuts or food nonetheless, but everything in our world that we both produce and consume. So let's take out the cookbook and look at the recipe it takes to bake our perfect world. Begin with 1, what causes our wasteful tendencies, 2, reviewing the burden it places on many, and finally, sprinkling in a little of what we can do to change. Whenever my mom used to get me donuts, I would take my precious time in choosing the perfect batch. You know, the freshly baked, perfectly round with chocolate glazed and a mountain of sprinkles on top. Mwah, chef's kiss, perfection. But while I was driven by my thought of the ideal donut, society is driven towards wastefulness because of 2 key factors, materialism and consumerism. Materialism is our emphasis on material goods, while consumerism is the practice of purchasing more and more. Both are very prevalent in our society today, which is engulfed with the notions, the more the merrier and or the newer the better. Because of that, we often wouldn't even take a second thought when purchasing a large amount of goods, thus resulting in our wastefulness because we never really need for the things that we get. The most common way we can see this in today's society is through the foundations of the fast fashion industry that promotes those same ideals of buy more, spend more, and more importantly, waste more. For those who don't know, So fast fashion is the creation of quickly made cheap clothes that aim to fit ever-changing fashion trends. You see, more and more people are buying these types of clothes for the sole reason of getting rid of them when they deem it as no longer cool. The Saturday Evening Post mentioned that the average American throws away nearly 81 pounds of clothing yearly. And for those that are donated, 3 out of 5 fast fashion garments end up in a landfill within a year's purchase. I know it's hard to picture the waste created by billions of pieces of clothing throughout the world, but to put it in more clearer perspective, the fast fashion industry as a whole is the second biggest polluter in the world. And that goes to show you how we can manage our materialism or control our consumerism, whether that means the overproduction of donuts or reckless shopping, buy clothes I might wear, but if I'm honest with you, I wouldn't. And repeating this process over and over again. You know, now thinking about it, donuts are that type of sweets. Like, honestly, I don't buy a dozen of donuts to eat a dozen of donuts right then and right there, just to have a few and admire the rest in front of me. And just like too many donuts can lead to serious health problems, too much consumption of natural resources can be devastating on many. We can first review the effects on one, our wildlife, and two, our society as a whole. When it comes to discussing the issue on wastefulness, it is pretty common for people to make the correlation between wastefulness and the impacts on our animals. And although it is a well-known fact in today's day and age, the situation at hand is much worse than we want to believe. Animals aren't as smart as us. Now, they can't distinguish all the donuts in the donut shop, unlike yours truly, but way more importantly, they have trouble determining if something is or isn't food. Animals can easily consume waste, become ill, or trapped in it due to factors like some waste not being biodegradable and then polluting our water, land, and even air if burnt. Over 3.5 million animals die each year due to pollution alone, and many species are going extinct just because of the way we handle waste. Overall, major systems need to change in order to prevent harm that we are inflicting on ourselves. And when it comes to biodiversity, our waste problem is severely plaguing the health of the world's species. The world's counts mention that each year we extract almost 90 billion tons of resources from the earth. And in the few years between 1970 and 2015, we more than tripled that consumption rate. If we continue this trend of using up way too much, we won't have a sustainable amount of items for the generations to come, much less our own. And yes, while recycling might seem like a great idea on paper, I'm sure we all know that it never goes out as intended. Recycling companies found that out of the 6.3 billion metric tons of plastic waste that has been generated, only around 9% of that has actually been recycled. Laws are changed each year to determine what waste is to begin with, and the situation, to put it very bluntly, is chaotic. Look, I get it. I really do. I get that we've all heard this before, how each and every one of us is doing, well, something wrong, everything wrong, and it's our fault. You know, sometimes I tell people about my sweet tooth, my love for donuts, the joke about my dad being a dentist, having a daughter like me, but I'm not always proud of it. Stuffing my face with whipped cream, eating boxes full of chocolate, knowing that the weight I gained and the cavities in my teeth were my fault. I felt I couldn't control it, so at some points I gave up trying. That mindset engraved in many of us is happening on a larger scale. We've one, generated centuries worth of waste, two, overlooked our bad habits, and now three, created a situation no one feels they can control. But here's the funny thing. We don't have to feel in control. We don't even have to be proud of our waste. Acknowledging that a problem exists and being willing to face it head on is already a tremendous step. So while I'm not necessarily proud of my sweet tooth and I'm still growing to terms with it, I understand that it's a problem with a solution. And all solutions in our world can only stem from us. So do not stop believing, because there is a way we can begin tackling our waste problem. No worries, it isn't the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, but actual plans being implemented using a resource that isn't leaving us anytime soon: technology. It is time that we look into more innovative ways to tackle our waste problem, and we can navigate towards the 2 H's. Step 1, hope. The first step to action is awareness and belief. We mustn't lose sight to the fact that there are ways to improve and prevent damage. And once we have that in mind, we've completed half the process. The US has already started looking towards companies like PureCycle, creating a way to recycle polypropylene, a common type of plastic, by removing contaminants, odor, and color until there's nothing left but a reusable resin. And already widely used, radio frequency identification technology that can be embedded in products and store vital information, like how to handle a product in a certain order. These are just few of the many companies and people achieving a cleaner world with the use of technology. And with the way things are going, we're on the right path. So now what can you personally do to contribute to this cause? Step 2, help. Start staying up to date with the best forms of technology. Promote it at a federal, state, community, or even just a household level. While you don't have to be some world-renowned engineer to make a difference, better understanding these materials and encouraging people to start applying these solutions will make our waste problem an issue of the past. Baking our perfect world is going to be difficult. Trust me, I get that. I can't even bake for the life of me, much less change our world in 9 to 10 minutes. But if we just begin somewhere, attempt the mess of our world, mix together our ideas, the outcome, if we plan on doing it right, could be as sweet as a donut. Thank you.
Amazing job. Thank you so much. Judges, her time was 9:56, if you guys weren't keeping track of that.
Got it. Thank you.
A quick question. This is Mira Coloraya. I'm supposed to be the 5th speaker, I believe, but I have a final round that just got posted. So is it okay if I go second?
Oh yes, you may. That's why I asked if anybody was double entered, but
yeah, they just posted it like 5 minutes ago. So
oh no, you are perfectly fine. Is that okay with everybody else if she goes next? All right, I hear no complaints. So Mira, you are next to go. Just give me like 1 minute to finish my ballot. Alrighty, and our next speaker will be Mira.
okay, I'm hoping you can see me and hear me all right.
Yes, I can, and I will time you as soon as you say your first word.
Okay.
Take your time.
In 2nd grade, we had a teacher named Miss Babalak. Yeah, that was her name. She was a substitute, but our real teacher was pretty bad, so she couldn't possibly be much worse, right? Wrong. There was a rule in school that said that we could only use the bathroom a limited amount of times before recess. This was to prevent students from constantly going to the bathroom to party with their friends. Because 2nd graders always decorating the walls with toilet paper. But this time I really had to use the bathroom. But when I asked Miss Babalak, she said, "I'm sorry, Mira, you can only use the bathroom a limited amount of times before recess. You'll have to wait another 2.5 hours. Couldn't believe it. Miss Babalak was willing to stick with the rules, so much so that she couldn't even let me use the bathroom once. But Miss Babalak isn't alone. According to the Business Insider in June 2020, there's at least one ridiculous rule in every single state, from confetti being prohibited in Alabama to fortune telling being illegal in Maryland. But this goes beyond our state. It cuts into our culture. And this is my concern. We have a problem with rules. We're not sure when to create them, why we create them, or how to create them effectively. We need to create smarter rules that are better for society. So, in today's speech, we'll first examine the causes of why we tend to create so many rules. Then, we'll look at the effects and see what happens when people feel obligated to follow those rules. Before finally, we will crack open the textbook and find a solution of how we can all create better rules. So, why is Miss Babalak obsessed with rules? Well, first, rules make it harder to change. And second, we prioritize punishing over teaching. So first, rules make it harder to change. Let's look at history. When women wanted a say in the government and therefore wanted the right to vote, there was already a rule in place that said that women couldn't vote. So it made it much harder to change that unfair law. But all of these rules not only happened in the past, but they continue to happen even today. According to Live Science in August 2020, the metric system is clearly better than the imperial one. It uses base 10 rather than a bunch of random numbers. Yet the US continues to use inches, feet, and yards. It's harder to change things once they're already implemented into society. And it's because of this that the US is being separated from the rest of the world. In fact, in October 2017, the US having the silly rule of sticking with the imperial system led to the loss of a multi-million-dollar spacecraft. It was said that the teams responsible for the launching and engineering were not on the same page. One team thought they were using the metric system, while the other team thought they were using the imperial one. We lost over $1 million simply because we weren't willing to change. But second, we prioritize punishing over teaching people. Whenever we want someone to realize what they're doing wrong or change their behavior, we punish them. And this is why most laws say if you commit this crime, you get this punishment. And this can be seen through the 3 strikes law. The 3 strikes law gives harsher punishments to offenders who committed violent crimes in the past. And though it may seem as if this law would deter violent crimes, it actually doesn't. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, most people commit crimes in fear, anger, or under the use of alcohol. And according to the Pew Research Center, from the time the law was created to 2017, there was almost no change in the amount of violent crimes committed because of the 3 strikes law. When this law was created, people must have been so focused on deterring violent crimes that they didn't realize that their law wasn't even doing that. But what can happen when we choose to follow Miss Babalak's rules? Well, really, following any ridiculous and unnecessary rules can lead to both mental and physical harm. In fact, Forbes reported in February of this year that a majority of Democrats, Republicans, vaccinated people, and unvaccinated people agree that the CDC has not made clear what their COVID safety rules are. People are not sure when and when not to wear masks, what fully vaccinated even means, and in general, how to keep safe in uncertain times like this. And it is this uncertainty because of unclear rules that's cost the US lives. In a world where immunocompromised people are getting sick and dying, the least we can do to minimize these losses is through providing clear guidance. When I was 8 years old, I was quite lonely. I had barely any friends. And when my only friend moved all the way across the country, I was all alone. However, after a couple weeks, an older 5th grader came up to me and started making the lamest jokes. She'd keep on saying the silliest puns until I finally laughed. After that, we became extremely close friends. However, one day, as we were sitting together and eating lunch, our teachers came up to us and told us that we were not allowed to have friends 2 years apart from us. I thought that was ridiculous. The rest of the day, I cried because a silly and unnecessary rule had taken my one and only friend from me. And for the rest of the school year, I was all alone. We need to minimize the amount of ridiculous, unnecessary, and unfair rules we have because not only do we not need them, but those rules can also hurt. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have rules or laws anymore because we need them for our society to run. But we need to cut down on those numerous unnecessary ones. So here are some rules for having better rules. Step 1 is to recognize why we have the rules we have. According to Yves Moyer, director of the Boston Consulting Group, in order to simplify the amount of rules and regulations we have, we need to realize the good and bad consequences of each of them. Step 2 is to remove all those unnecessary rules. According to the Harvard Business Review, we need to prioritize what matters more in today's world. The rest of those rules will only cause more harm. And step 3 is to reveal. Reveal your opinion to the rest of the world and speak out about it. And we can see this through both Rosa Parks and Malala Yousafzai. Rosa Parks did not let racism stop her from sitting where she wanted to, and Malala did not let sexism hinder her education. Both people chose to speak out about unfair, unnecessary issues, even when no one else did. So remember the 3 R's: recognize, remove, and reveal. While Miss Babalak was pretty bad, she was the least of my concerns. I've seen so many unfair rules affect people in terrible ways. We saw how ridiculous rules restricted women from voting, wasted millions of dollars, allowed people to die from a deadly virus, and even impacted little 3rd grade me. But if we minimize the amount of rules we have, we are sure to get a passing grade. Thank you. If it's okay, I'll head to my other round, but thank you for judging.
Yes, amazing job. Thank you. Good luck.
Yeah.
Alrighty, we're gonna follow the list back down again, and our next speaker will be Clarity.
Yes, would you like me to put my title of my speech in the chat, or do you not need that?
Yeah, actually that would be great if you want to do that, sure.
All right, I can do that. Give me 1 second here. All right, it should be in the chat now. All right. Are all the judges ready?
Yep, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Imagine you have a crazy scientist friend. Let's call him, I don't know, maybe Doc? Yeah, let's go with Doc. Doc shows you his latest invention, a souped-up DeLorean sports car, which happens to be a time machine. Only for time travel is a speed of 88 miles per hour, or 1.21 gigawatts of electric energy. Okay, this may sound a little like the plot from the movie Back to the Future, but just hang with me here. Our first travel through time, we go back to the year 1609. As you watch from a distance, as we do not want to alter the space-time continuum, we watch as Galileo invents the first ever telescope. Today, Galileo is held in great historical esteem for his contributions to science. However, in 1609, this was not the case. Galileo's observations support the idea that the Earth and the planets revolved around the sun, a fact we know to be true today. However, in Galileo's time, This was directly contradicted by the church, which believed that the earth was the center of the universe and that all other celestial bodies revolved around it. Any other ideas were considered heresy, punishable by imprisonment and or death. Galileo was viewed as wrong, ethically and morally wrong. Let's continue our time-traveling adventure and explore how ethics change with time, how they continue to change, and the force causing the change. Before we move on, let's shift gears a little bit, just so we're all on the same page. We all know where babies come from, right? They develop when two people kiss on their wedding day, right? Today, a child can be brought into the world without the need for two people physically touching, and no storks are not involved. I am talking about in vitro fertilization, or IVF. According to the Mayo Clinic, this is the process where a mature egg is retrieved from the ovary. Then it is fertilized with the sperm, and then the embryo is transferred to the uterus. All right, now that we've that established, back to the time machine. Let's go back 3 to 4 generations ago, while our great-great-grandfolks are in their mid-20s, and have a conversation with them about how someone can have a child without physically touching one of the opposite gender. They'll probably respond with, "What? What kind of witchcraft is that? People are playing God in the future. This is ethically and morally not okay." As mentioned in the book, Right Wrong, prior to the first test tube baby, there was a strong opposition by the general public for IVF. However, after a month of the first IVF baby being born, more than half of the public supported its use. In fact, according to the European Society for Human Reproduction, more than 8 million IVF babies have been born worldwide. Great Scott, 8 million babies. So what does this show us? Ethics change with time. Back to the present. I have a friend that suffered from congenital TTP, a blood disorder which causes blood clots to form throughout the body. The result? They were constantly in the hospital, often for weeks at a time. Congenital TTP is a genetic disorder, recessively inherited. So if my friend's parents wanted to have another child, the all-natural way, their next child had a 25% risk of also inheriting TTP. However, their next child was conceived using IVF and embryo selection. Therefore, TTP was virtually eliminated. And so their next child did not have TTP. Therefore, no week-long hospital visits and no constantly being ill for that child. This process of embryo selection has evolved over the last 20 years. From the late 90s to the early 2000s, there's been a lot of ethical debate. The common theme? Doctors selecting out the healthy embryos as playing God and isn't ethical. However, in a 2015 study by the Journal of Assisted Reproduction, found that more than 75% of the population supported IVF when eliminating severe disease. In fact, according to author Juan Enriquez, there will come a day when people will ask, "What do you mean you do not edit out genes in your children you knew would be harmful? Don't you realize you could have prevented a HER2 or P53 mutation?" Future generations look at our current birthing practices as primitive and barbaric, and they may judge our current concept of morality when it comes to childbirth and gene editing. Going even further, currently 1/3 of the population supports the idea of genomic editing for human enhancement. Great Scott, human enhancement? That's the time machine. Let's go to the year 2222, 200 years into the future. And forget roads and even flying cars. Let's hypothesize that the human race has largely started colonizing space due to the current ways of the 1900s to the 2000s. But the 2222 human is not the 2022 human. In space, due to the lack of gravity, it demineralizes our skeleton, distorts the heart, and ruins our eyesight. And in space, there are high energy particles which decrease human cognition. And also, there are massive amounts of cancer-causing radiation. So how do we deal with this? Perhaps human enhancement? But whatever we do, the 2022 human will not survive in space. Therefore, ethics continue to and will continue to change. Certainly, we would all like to believe that ethics are unchanging, constant. But as history shows us, this is not the case. So what has and continues to cause these ethical shifts? Perhaps a better understanding of the world? Yes. Human necessity? Sure. But the common underlying thread of all ethical change is technological advancement. As our technology advances, our ethics change. Galileo's telescope is one example. Human conception in IVF is another. However, there are many more examples as well. Consider human slavery, which has literally been around since the beginning of humanity. In fact, the abolishment of slavery is a relatively new concept in the complete timeline of the human race. So what exactly happened? Well, I can tell you that people didn't just wake up one day all woke and ethical after thousands of years of slavery. But considering that 1 barrel of oil equates to 10 people manually working for an entire year, it's not coincidental that the abolitionist movement in the Civil War perfectly coincided with the machinery-powered industrial revolution of the 1800s, which led to a decreased need in human labor and ultimately slave labor. So technology changes ethics. Clearly, our time-traveling adventure has shown that ethics change with time. What might be ethically okay today might not be ethically okay tomorrow. As such, we need to be extremely mindful of our actions and how they impact others, people of today and people of future generations. Likewise, we need to be careful when judging those of past times, as our ethics are a result, a consequence of past times and technological advancement. Change will continue, and as we do not have a clear roadmap of exactly where we're going, perhaps where we're going, we won't need roads. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clarity. Her time was 8:48, judges, just to make sure. Thank you so much. Just give us 2 minutes and then we will go to the next speaker. Are all my judges ready?
Yep, I'm good to go.
Amazing. Our next speaker will be Abby Porter.
Hi.
Hi.
Let me know when to go.
You are all good. I will start time on your first word. Good luck.
Last year, my squad had homecoming dance, and y'all, it was awful. First of all, homecoming makes no sense when everybody in school stays in town after graduation. You're already home. Where else are you coming? And second, I didn't have a date. I mean, I know that 14-year-old boys get intimidated by strong, beautiful, intelligent women, but my classmates are pretty judgmental, and I don't need to be judged by them when I get judged by adults every weekend. You get it? That was a speech joke. Healthline on July 3rd, 2020 explains when we're afraid of judgment from our peers, we suppress our own emotions. We think that if you just don't admit to what you're feeling, then nobody else will see it. It's sort of like when you try to follow one of those TikTok trends where you cut your own hair and it turns out horrible, but your mom still makes you go to school? Like, maybe if you just don't admit that it was a 2 a.m. mistake, then everybody will just think it's news fashion. It never works. But as a second Healthline article on March 31st, 2020 highlights, when we hide our emotions out of fear or judgment, we abbreviate what we're feeling, which does nothing but hurt us. Brene Brown explains in her 2013 book, The Power of Vulnerability, that in American culture, we associate vulnerability with emotions we like to avoid, such as fear, shame, and uncertainty. Our fear of weakness causes us to lose sight of things. And I am tired of losing sight of things. My doctor says I need glasses, but I refuse. I'll just continue to run into things. So today, let's examine the causes of our fear of vulnerability, how that affects us, and solutions. So I never ended up getting a date to last year's homecoming, but that's okay. I just stayed home and attempted TikTok trends. 2 a.m. in my bathroom. I think you know how this one ends. So there's this girl in my school that I just don't get along with. Her name is Veronica, and she's been talking about her boyfriend for months. Apparently he's from Canada and is gonna fly in to take her to this year's homecoming dance. He probably smells like maple syrup, and he's probably not real. I too have a Canadian boyfriend. Let's examine the causes of our fear of vulnerability. We've been raised in a strong world, and we're afraid to be more afraid. First, we're taught to express what we're feeling. Think about it. Children model what they see, and most of our favorite shows have characters that are perfect and don't seem to struggle with anything. Like my favorite show growing up was Barbie, Life in the Dream House. And that girl lived in the dream house. The only thing she struggled with was which heels look better with which dress. Kids don't know that these shows are fictional. So when we struggle, but our favorite characters don't, we think that we're the problem. A study done in 2011 by Psychology Today explains that when we grow up thinking this, we hide our sadness, fear, frustration, and emotions. The idea of perfection causes our imperfect emotions to appear as a fault. Second, we're afraid to be more afraid. Very Well Mind on July 15th, 2021 explains that vulnerability is a state of emotional exposure that comes with a certain degree of uncertainty. It is a person's willingness to accept the emotional risk that comes from being open. Expressing vulnerability is like opening a can of worms. It is messy and uncertain. We take to keep our emotions in a nice neat package to avoid showing weakness. It's sort of like when you put your clothes in your bed to avoid putting them away, and then you finally look under there, and it's a complete mess. We need to face this mess and put the clothes away. It is not a healthy habit. Can I be honest for a moment? Middle school speech is kind of rough. Not only are there cliques in regular middle school, but there's also groups in speech. Listen, I know I do oratory, but that does not mean I don't hang out with the policy kids. Just kidding. I absolutely do not want to hang out with the policy kids. Like, what is a K? And why do you need counter plans? Shouldn't your original plans work? Let's examine the effects of our fear of vulnerability. We punish those who are brave enough to show their weakness, and bottling up our emotions can cause physical harm. First, we're taught to not talk about our feelings. So we punish those who are brave enough to show their vulnerability. And that makes no sense! They're being brave, y'all. Do you know how much strength it takes to admit you're afraid of spiders? What do you think has to play Charlotte and Charlotte's Web? It takes a lot. I'm not afraid. I'm brave. The Guardian, on October 25th, 2018, explains that we wish we had the strength to admit our own fear. So we put others down to make ourselves become more strong. In fact, it is the punishment of those who don't acknowledge their vulnerability on those who do. The punishment of those who are locked in on the source of their own terror. Vulnerability itself. Vulnerability is seen as a terror due to each other. We inflict a form of punishment on those who acknowledge their vulnerability, which causes a fear of the already difficult action. Second, when we don't express vulnerability, we get stress, and that stress can harm us. The Washington Post of April 20th, 2020 explains that 60% of US adults struggle from daily stress and worry. 60% is a lot. I mean, it might not be when you're counting how many answers you get correct on your math test, but it is. When you think about the 198 million people that are struggling in the United States, stress starts mentally but affects our body physically. The American Psychological Association of November 1st, 2018 explains that stress affects almost every part of our body, from our heart rate to our digestion, and even a delay in puberty. And that's great for nobody. Middle school would be so much worse if we all start puberty at 16 instead of 12. Stress is commonplace in our emotions. We constantly face it alone. We judge others who admit to experiencing stress or facing the same issues as well. Writing this speech was the first time that I could admit that I struggled with being vulnerable. I love my middle school, I do, but sometimes it is so difficult to be myself. I'm constantly comparing who I am to my classmates and my teammates. But I'm doing my best to recognize my emotions and deal with them in a healthy way. And we should all work towards that. So solutions. We need to change the way we talk to kids and recognize our own struggles. First, we need to let kids know that it's okay to be vulnerable. We should also let them know that it's okay to put deodorant every once in a while. Just because you're emotionally vulnerable does not mean your armpits need to be vulnerable. Look, if our struggles with vulnerability begin when we're children, then the best way to fix it is to make sure that the cycle doesn't begin again. A study done by Washington State University in 2018 explains that we need to let kids know when we're struggling with our own emotions. Tell them what we're going to do to make the situation better. Let them see the whole trajectory. For example, when I was in kindergarten, I watched my mom struggle every night as she studied for nursing school. I remember being so worried, but she kept telling me that everything was fine. This is her problem to solve. My mom still struggles with facing the incorrect concepts of vulnerability. By incorporating vulnerability discussions into everyday family conversations, we can make sure that our children or siblings don't have to struggle as we did. Finally, we need to be more aware of our own mental health and stress levels. The American Psychological Association of 2019 explains that we can eliminate our own stress by journaling for a week to check our stressors, incorporating work-life boundaries, and even learning how to relax. And I know that might sound bananas that we need to learn how to relax, but let's be honest. Most of our relaxing takes place where we're binge-watching Gossip Girls a way to avoid doing our homework. That's not relaxing. That's stress-laxing, and we're all guilty of it. We live in an extremely stressful world, but by learning how to be calm, our world becomes a little less intimidating. So take a moment every day to meditate or practice breathing exercises. These small steps can lead to big results. So I think I may actually go to my school's homecoming dance this year. I mean, I still don't get the point. Like if I wanted a homecoming, I just walk into our local Walmart, but I want to prove that I can have fun and be myself without a date. Today we learned why we struggle being vulnerable, how that hurts us, and solutions. Rocca's Canadian boyfriend did turn out to be fake, but as I told her, it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to be yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Amazing job. Judges, her time was 9:50. All right, give me like 30 seconds real quick. I'm just finishing with the ballot. Alrighty, judges, are you ready for the next speaker?
Yep.
Alrighty, our next speaker will be Anjani.
Hi, can all the judges hear and see me okay?
Yes, we can. I will start time on your first word.
Perfect. I used to be a bit of a patriotic kid growing up. And believe me when I say, I don't use that phrase lightly. In fact, when I first learned how to say the Pledge of Allegiance in school, I got it into my 5-year-old mind that I had to recite it to every American flag that I saw, not just the one in my classroom. My deep patriotism was initially harmless, so my parents didn't say anything. But they eventually had to give up the bit when we saw a Marvel movie together in theaters, and I proudly saluted Chris Evans as Captain America every single time his red, white, and blue shield came on screen. Patriotism is tricky that way. Usually it's harmless until it escalates into something more intense. We've all seen it before. Strong declarations of American allegiance devolving into beliefs of American superiority. There's even a name for this idea of supremacy: American exceptionalism, or the belief that the United States is politically, morally, and institutionally superior to other countries. It's a gospel that our schools and politicians preach, but it is ruining Americans' capacity for compassion, humility, and criticism. So today, we'll flag down the causes and effects of American exceptionalism before finally pledging to solve this problem once and for all. Now, the concept that the US is better than other countries is deeply rooted in the history of our nation. The idea was around the 1940s when the press urged America to enter World War II and become a beacon of hope soaring above everyone else. And the early 1800s for Manifest Destiny, when we said it was our God-given right to go on what was essentially a giant quest to call dibs on North America. And it even dates back to the 1600s, when the first Puritans stepped on American soil and instantly deemed it a city upon a hill. The truth is, we've been laying the bricks for exceptionalism since the second our nation was born. And even now, in the modern day, every offhanded comment about our inherent superiority, every snap judgment made regarding other nations, is just another brick added to an ever-growing wall of exceptionalism. However, there's a scientific reason why our society pushes this agenda as well. Psychologists Ben Tappan and Ryan McKay from the University of London figured it out in their 2016 study, where American test subjects were asked if they possessed a variety of moral characteristics. But throughout this investigation, the participants consistently cast themselves in a biased, more positive light than others, often denying to possess many of the negative personality traits. Tappan and McKay coined this phenomenon the self-enhancement effect, where the innate urge to overlook our flaws and focus on our strengths. And unfortunately for us, this impulse translates to our view of our country as well, forcing us to place the United States on an unrealistic pedestal. Since our bodies tell us that we're better and that we're the only concern, we've conditioned ourselves towards a dangerous mindset: exceptionalism and ignorance. Because when we think America is exceptional on all accounts, we're willing to do anything to preserve that mentality. And this includes teaching our children that we've always been a shining beacon of integrity, even if that's not always the truth. And that brings us to the first effect of our problem. The American education system refuses to hold our nation accountable. In fact, a 1954 textbook titled History of Georgia rewrote the history of racial prejudice in America as a whole. It stated, the master of slaves often had a barbecue or a picnic for them. They then had a great frolic. This isn't just censorship. This is erasure. We are so unwilling to accept that our exceptional nation has made mistakes in the past that we boil down slavery to a simple blemish in our past. Centuries of prejudice, Centuries of blood and sweat and tears, centuries of African American suffering have been reduced to frolics and meadows. Sadly, the issue doesn't stop there. Our images of American identity aren't just wrapped up in themes of superiority, but more specifically, white superiority. When we place a specific nation on a pedestal, it inherently implies that other countries and the people from those other countries simply aren't as worthy. This is a dangerously cruel message, and one that I believe for the majority of my life. For years now, I felt as if my Indian roots tainted me in some way. I believed that the white American identity marketed to me was better, exceptional even, that the country of my ethnic background could never compare to this city upon a hill. And though I never wanted it to, this manifested in my daily life. Whether it was agreeing to cover up my ethnic features just a little too eagerly or jealously glancing at a perfect white model for just a second too long. And I know I'm not alone in this. Almost every person of color I know has grappled with the idea that they aren't as good as their white counterparts. This is the ultimate implication of American exceptionalism. We strip an entire nation's capacity for nuance, people of their own right to an identity. But I and people of color everywhere am American. This identity shouldn't be one we have to fight to claim. However, we do still have a chance to weaken the grasp American exceptionalism has on our lives. And I'm not saying we can completely eradicate the problem from existing. I mean, that would be like trying to get 5-year-old me away from the American flags and back into my seat. But as long as we tackle exceptionalism with small, simple steps, we can take away the power it has over our society. And luckily for us, Dr. Candy Khan, Diversity and Inclusion Education Specialist, outlined these steps for us in a simple abbreviation called the 3 R's that we'll be breaking down. Now, the first R stands for reflection. Before diving straight into anything, take the time to reflect on your own biases against other nations. Accepting that we've contributed to the issue prepares us for the second R, researching. Well, there's nothing wrong with loving this country or being patriotic. We also have to research the shortcomings of the soil we live on. Read up on our true, uncensored history. Listen to minority groups about their experiences in America. And remember that every nation has a rich and beautiful culture. Finally, after researching, it's time for the last R, reaching out. Contact those around you with exceptionalist mindsets and warn them about the dangers of their mentality. This way, the fight against exceptionalism can ripple throughout society. And if we follow these 3 steps, if we put in the time, the effort, the work that it takes, we can unravel the red, white, and blue blindfolds wrapped around our nation's eyes. So over the course of the past 10 minutes, we've flagged down the causes of American exceptionalism, understood the negative ways it affects ourselves and our society, but most importantly, vowed to raise the white flag on this harmful mindset. So while I may have been the biggest and loudest patriot to exist 9 years ago, I'm grateful to now understand that the United States is a perfectly imperfect nation. Our country is liberating, it's independent, it's brave, but most importantly, it's equal. The ground we walk on is no higher than anyone else's, and the air we breathe is no better than what surrounds it. There's no shame in accepting this fact, in adoring our multifaceted nation, even with the knowledge that changes need to be made. After all, there is nothing more patriotic than loving a country so deeply that you'll fight to change it for the better. Thank you.
Amazing job. Thank you so much. Judges, her time was 9:51. Alrighty, are our judges ready for the next speaker?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay, next up, last but not least, we have Anna Fang.
Hello, yes. Just checking, can you see me and hear me all right?
Yes, I can. I will start the time on your first word.
All right, great. Some people have friends. Some people have best friends. I have an overwhelming fear of rejection, so I didn't even try. At school, someone came up to me during lunch, and instead of saying hi, they just told me a joke. Then they asked if I had any jokes. And I said, "You're looking at it." And that is how I met my best friend. By calling myself a joke, I had broken the ice and effectively won over the heart of my future bestie. I never felt this good about feeling so bad about myself. And I'm not just talking about harmless jokes here and there. In general, there seems to be more humor, more memes, more discussions on how much people hate themselves than ever before. And it is this very trend that prompted Philip Marina, a marriage and family therapist who was passionate about mental health, to speak about the way our society encourages self-hate. In his 2019 article on self-deprecation, Marina points out a major misconception. That despite popular belief, using humor to point out your own flaws is not a healthy coping skill for overcoming insecurities. In fact, it does just the opposite. And that is why I'm concerned. Self-hating attitudes are not only accepted by our culture, they're often encouraged. And if we are the generation who wants to finally put an end to hate and discrimination of others, then we have to start with ourselves. So today, let us go over the problems, discuss the causes, and finally distinguish what can be done to solve this. For example, whenever I don't achieve something the way I wanted to achieve it, I bully myself until I do. Seems like the perfect strategy, a good way to put some fire underneath me, right? Wrong. When we self-deprecate, we're just bullying the only person on our side, the only person that can actually help us succeed. So how and why are we doing this? First, self-hate is a bad tool to use. When we're talking to certain people, we might purposely put ourselves down in order to get a laugh or appear more humble. However, we often confuse self-deprecation and being humble as the same thing. Take, for instance, Pete Davidson, a comedian, actor, and SNL star who is known for putting himself down, saying things like, "Being around my coworkers makes me feel like garbage, and I'm only here because people feel sorry for me." Even though other people praised him, his attitude caused him to believe his own lies, until one day he reached a breaking point, experienced a mental breakdown, and worried all of the people who loved him. Self-hate didn't make Pete a better actor. It only proved to worsen his mental health and become a cause for concern. Next, we blame ourselves for things we can't control. We often feel this need to change or speak out on something we can't control. And when we fail to do that, we become hopeless and blame it all on ourselves. Coach and mentor Elizabeth House writes, "Self-blame is a futile control mechanism. We can't fault ourselves. Every day, we're repeatedly exposed to conditions outside of our control. Behavioral self-blame is a maladaptive attempt to fulfill a genuine, primitive need for survival and psychological safety. When we witness something we know we can't control, we turn to self-blame." In the first semester of school, my friends and I all auditioned for the school ASB. However, I was the only one that got in. And obviously, I was really happy, but I decided not to tell my friends. I didn't want to make it seem like I was rubbing it in their faces, so I decided to never, ever mention it again. Now, we've all hit our successes to seem more likable sometime in our life, but what exactly causes this behavior? First, we're taught and raised to act smaller. Louisa Omlin, known for her stand-up show What Would Beyonce Do, noticed that a disproportionate amount of female comedians use self-deprecating humor in their acts. She explains that women have been taught to judge themselves with acute harshness, and the result is a population which is afraid of feeling too confident or too comfortable in their own skin. It's almost as if all of us have grown to expect women to fall short of success. So female comics, in order to appease their audience, hate themselves before others do. Next, society shows us the negative aspects of the world every day, and it causes us to blame ourselves. In an environment where we keep receiving bad news almost every single day, we often become hopeless and even throw ourselves into a state of negativity. Markham Hyde of the Time website says more than half of Americans say the news causes them stress, and many report feeling anxiety, fatigue, or sleep loss as a result. Yet 1 in 10 adults check the news every single hour. We know that we could always help donate or take action against almost any problem. However, we often question, what difference does it make, as we make such a small impact in a big world? I know this all too well. In all my social circles, from friends to family, I'm Anna. Smiling, joyful, bright, and a little too obsessed with slime. However, the reality in my head is very different from what most people get to see. In my head, I'm Anna. Not good enough. But I can't just tell people I feel like a disappointment, because that wouldn't be consistent with the Anna they want to see or the Anna they're used to seeing. So I have no choice but to cover up my feelings with humor so that my negativity becomes accepted. But because we don't talk about how we really feel, we distance ourselves from the people who care about us the most. And it just causes them to think that we just simply don't have problems or simply can't be taken seriously. When we self-deprecate, when we make fun of our problems, we're just speaking a different language to avoid our hatred. So it's time we learn the language that addresses our hatred. First, let's learn to accept praise. As simple and easy as it sounds, we often find it hard to accept compliments. One of my friends complimented me at school, and they said they liked my sweater. Despite this simple compliment, I panicked and desperately tried to think of the perfect response. Thanks. I like your, shoes. Sorry. And that's why I never accept compliments. Columnist Zilly Rain explains the urge to justify or qualify your success is overwhelming. You want to buckle and say that it wasn't you, that you just got lucky, or you won't do so well next time. Compliments can feel just like a minor form of social interaction. We all say them, we all receive them, but it is just as important as learning to give one as learning to take one. Next, prepare to fail. A way to avoid a sudden, in-the-moment unmotivation, make 3 schedules for yourself. One for a low energy, medium energy, and high energy day. That way, if you wake up and you're feeling like saying no to everything, you still have a plan to achieve at least something. There's really no point in forcing yourself to do something you truly aren't ready for. Because self-deprecation comes from having such high standards all the time, we need to learn to give ourselves room to prepare for anything that could come our way. The lesson we always learn in the end is that short-term relief can cost us our happiness in the long run. Each time we throw ourselves under the bus, we're telling ourselves what we think we deserve. We've seen how problematic this attitude can be, how self-hate is slowly gaining traction, and what can be done to solve this. So next time my friend asks me to tell a joke, I'll just say, why don't they play poker in the jungle? 'Cause there's too many cheetahs. Get it? Cheaters? Cheetahs? Yeah, I should probably work on my jokes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great job. Anna's time was 9:37. That concludes everybody in our round. Great job, everybody. We will be finishing up ballots, and good luck to you all.
Thank you for judging.
Thank you so much for judging. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good day.